You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1180. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We want you to thrive. We want you to have those operations down. We want you to have down all just like the marketing and how clients find you. But we don't want you to do that at the expense of, losing your soul to business. We want you to love your practice. We want you to show up every day and be like, how the heck is this my life? How did I get to do such amazing work that I absolutely love? We know there's tons of ways to make money, and we want you to love the way that you choose to enter into the world and the way that you choose to do therapy in the world. Um, you know, there's lots of things as we work with clients, or even as we dig into things ourselves, as we're in this series, kind of dead center middle of the series of the Better Mental Wellness series, where we might realize we've betrayed ourselves, where maybe we gave up our power for other people's agendas, or maybe we just realized something about ourselves after we did something and said, man, I shouldn't have showed up that way. I've got some regret around it. Or maybe it's manifest in a number of different areas, which is why I'm so excited to talk with our guest today, Ilene Smith. Ilene Smith is going to be sharing with us about self-betrayal. We'll be digging into what is self-betrayal, how to work with clients on self-betrayal. What does that look like for ourselves? But Ilene is a former trauma therapist, author, speaker, and creator of The Truth Method. Additionally, Ilene is a somatic experiencing practitioner, certified professional coach, and holds master's degrees in mental health counseling and exercise physiology. Over the past decade, she's been dedicated to helping others resolve trauma symptoms, alleviate chronic stress, and achieve deeper healing. Ilene, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you about what I believe is such a powerful topic that we don't focus enough on in our healing. So thanks for having
Mm,
me.
yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. Well, let's just define what you mean by self-betrayal, and then maybe we can kind of dig into that a little bit. So, like, when you say self-betrayal, what do you mean?
It's a good question. Self betrayal is really all the ways and all the behaviors that we have where we let our environments control us rather than our internal being and our internal mechanisms control what we desire. And often we betray ourselves because we don't feel a sense of safety within ourselves. So we're more concerned about how our environment is going to experience us. So what we do is we give ourselves up, or we abandon ourselves or abandon our needs in order to be in relationship with someone else or our environment.
Mm. Now, how does that manifest? Like in, say, you said relationships or in our environment. Like, what does that look like in the work world? What does that look like in friendships and romantic relationships?
It's such a good question. So, I mean, it can look a thousand different ways. Like we have a thousand different versions of it. It can be something as simple as saying yes when we mean no, or not expressing our emotional needs when we are having strong feelings about something. It could be something as simple as self-sabotaging. We're constantly, we don't even realize we're doing it, but we're constantly betraying ourselves, even in small ways. Did I eat enough? Or I didn't eat enough, or I ate too much. Oh, height or weight on a license. things are so simple, or I'm just going to have another drink, right? That's all self-betrayal. Like even the things that we say we're going to do that we're going to not, that we go against our inner knowing. Those are simple ways we betray ourselves. Or in relationships, maybe you stay in a toxic relationship when you know you deserve better. Um, so there's maybe you are going down a career path or staying in a job because everyone else wants you to do it. Um, and the list goes on. I mean, I can keep going if you'd like, but I think
Mm,
that gives you kind of a simple framework of where it starts, or the ways it gets us in trouble. Because what it does is it doesn't allow us to be able to fully be in our authentic selves. Because we're
yeah.
the piece of self betrayal is really that you're abandoning yourself in some way,
So
shape,
why
or form.
does like, why does that happen?
Well, it starts way before we even know it's starting. So when you're born, you have no discernment between yourself and your environment. So you're born whole, right? You're born this ball of love with innocence, and you're born freely. But the moment your environment cues you that there's something wrong with you, just like a parent saying, why can't you be more like Johnny? Or don't cry, be a good girl, go to Harvard, be the best athlete, right? All those things lead you to a step to push it further away from yourself rather than toward yourself. So basically, when the environmental cues, whether it's parents or siblings or peers, I mean, being bullied, all those things cue a child to not feel safe and not believe they're enough. So if you have a parent, for example, who only gives a child conditional love, right? Johnny got A's on his test, so he's praised and he's loved and he's told how wonderful he is. But if Johnny comes home with a B, why couldn't you do better? Right? All of those things that tell him that that wasn't enough, even if he tried hard, even if that was the best he could do, he's then he then forms this idea that I'm only going to be loved if I perform. So very early on, those messages start getting imprinted in him. So Johnny grows up never feeling like he's enough. And then he goes out in the work world, and what does he do? He just pushes and pushes and pushes and believes that the only way he's going to be loved is by metrics, is by doing well, getting a bigger paycheck. And he may not like what he's doing, but he just continues to believe that the way he's going to get love is through achievement and money. And you see that a lot with successful entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
Right, there's other versions of it. It's the child who didn't get to have an expression of their feelings. They wind up in an adult relationship, and they wind up, and I don't like to use this term, but I'm going to use it here because I think it's a term that we all know. That's the person who winds up codependent, and they've never had an opportunity to, even maybe they had controlling parents who made all decisions for them, and so they turn out to be the adult who doesn't even know what they want. They lose all contact with themselves. So the idea of where we abandon ourselves starts at a very young age, and it starts from those environmental cues. So if you didn't learn as a child to have autonomy, how would you know as an adult to have autonomy?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, when people start, is there a certain kind of phase of life or when things start to happen when people realize, oh my gosh, I have been self betraying myself for years. Forget this. I'm going to change. Like, are there things that maybe speed that up that make clients, start to think, "Okay, I'm now realizing all that I've done to myself?" Or, like, I guess, are there situations, like, I'm thinking of, like, divorce or, having, a parent pass away, or are there, like, big things that usually trigger this? Or is it a slow, steady creep? Like, how does it emerge to realize that?
I think it's different for everyone, but I would say this. I think we're always willing to make change when we're in enough pain or we're uncomfortable enough. And so maybe somebody goes along to get along until a moment where their nervous system or their bodies just can't tolerate it anymore. Or maybe they stay in a marriage for years not getting their needs met until the moment where they can't tolerate it, or maybe they wind up having an affair, right? Usually, right, the changes often happen for people in the discomfort and in crisis. So while everyone's different, I think fundamentally we don't change unless there's some sort of unsettledness or restlessness or discomfort inside.
Mm. So then where do you see the work really kind of start to take off when people realize self-betrayal? Like what's that process look like for people to undo some of that?
Well, I mean, I think it all starts with awareness. How many times, I know for myself, I've had clients come in and they're like, I don't understand why I'm, saying yes when I mean no, or I'm doing something that I don't want to do. Right. And the first part, the thing that we have to start doing is I don't think you can really know where you're going until you understand how you got to where you are. And and so I like to think of it as when you can start putting the pieces in place and making meaning, or making, sorting things out that didn't make any sense to you. So once that foundation is laid and the light bulb goes off to see where the origins of all of it started, it sets up the platform for that person to start observing their own behaviors and their own patterns, and to be able to see what their experience is. And I think the work really starts there.
Mm. And what's it look like after that?
Well, again, everyone's different, but there's a, when it has to happen slowly, the unwinding has to happen slowly. And what I often see is people being having more capacity to set boundaries, or be able to state what they need, or share what their emotions are. And a lot of times, it becomes, when it first begins to happen, I think that people get a little can get rigid in their boundaries, and there's a big adjustment period when you start awakening and coming online and understanding all the ways that you haven't taken care of yourself. And remember, a person didn't get there overnight, so the changes aren't going to happen overnight. It's really a slow process to build enough safety within the body, within the self. Then slowly those pieces, um, of betray seem to they start melting away, because the person has a little bit more resilience each time they don't betray themselves.
Mm. Yeah, now I think there's some modalities. We talked about some of them before we started. What are some kind of direct ways that people start to really work on these things and dig in?
Well, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. There's all the ways that are top down, which is the intellectual process of understanding, and then there's all the ways that you have to find a space in your body to be uncomfortable and feel the discomfort of of what's new, because that's the hardest part. Is People betray themselves because it feels easier than tolerating their environment, not feeling safe. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and I can unpack that a little bit. When I say that is, for example, let's take the person that doesn't express their needs because they're worried that they're going to disappoint their spouse or everyone else around them. And all of a sudden they express their needs, and there might be a reaction from a spouse or their children or whatever, but they have to be able to stand firm and tall in themselves to say it's okay if I'm not loved because I expressed my needs and somebody's mad at me. And that's a very hard part of this, especially if they've been doing it a certain way for so long.
Mhm. Something always comes up when you're running a private practice. Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your private practice. It's super easy to set up and get started, and if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all your data for you. Here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today. Yeah. And when I think about the average clinician, they're probably not necessarily, thinking through this lens of self-betrayal. Um, what do you wish the average clinician had eyes for when they were sitting there in sessions?
What do I think that the clinician could see? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Like
I
what
mean, like,
yeah,
there's things like when it comes to, like, say, anxiety, or working with kids, there's, like, baseline things that maybe we're like, yeah, if you're not getting enough sleep, if your kids aren't, eating decent food, if they're overstressed and have a ton of screen time, yeah, they're probably acting a little bit crazy. Like we probably could like reduce, some of those intakes and their brains could simmer down a little bit. And, otherwise those things are going to amplify any pre-existing symptoms for whether it's anxiety, ADHD or whatever. Like for that sort of thing where there's just like you would love, with this mindset to help other therapists, like what would you want them to know?
um, is that it's more about helping the client see what they can't see in the origins of their behaviors, and to really start deconstructing and helping the clients deconstruct and reconstruct reality.
Mhm. And what does that look like for them to reconstruct reality?
Well, is to help them, I would say, create new evidence for a new reality, right? Like nothing changes until you're willing to facilitate some change, right? Like, so it's about helping a client go out in the world and start building new evidence that challenges their current belief system.
Like, what are some examples of someone doing that? I think that, um, I I'm kinda struggling to figure out, like, how does that actually look for a client? So, like, someone's working with you or with a therapist, and you're like, "We're gonna challenge your belief system." Like, what does that look like in the next week between
Well,
sessions?
it's okay. Let's take the same person uh, who's constantly saying yes when they mean no. And so the challenge becomes is to go into opposite action and say no if you mean no, and then to be able to sit with that experience regardless of how other people react. And then
Mm,
to really notice what it feels like to take care of your own needs versus give up your needs. So it's
to kinda
basically
do some experiments, like, to figure out, like, "Oh, okay, this is what came up for me when I did the opposite of what I wanna do."
correct, and to be able to witness both sets of experiences. And
Mm,
because you can't really change anything if you don't have something to compare it to, right? So
mhm,
if something felt, and I'm sure, saying no when you mean no feels uncomfortable. But what does it feel like on the other side of it when you actually don't go out for dinner with the people you don't wanna go out with, right?
mhm,
So maybe the initial piece feels uncomfortable, but what did it feel like to then go do what you wanted? Maybe you went and you took a yoga class instead of having the obligatory dinner.
mhm,
So helping them see that the new reality, there's gonna be pieces of it that feel beautiful and other pieces that initially are gonna feel so uncomfortable because for the first time, they're not abandoning themselves.
mm.
You
Yeah, and I
see
think
the
then it's
thing
like that seed that's just starting with them.
exactly, and so it's building that muscle, that new muscle, right? And when you go, let's say you're starting a new workout, you're not going to go full force head in first, right? It's not going to be an immersion. It's going to be the small steps that you take, right? It's going to be lifting the 5 pound weight, then the 10 pound weight, then the 20 pound weight. And it's the same thing with working in this realm with self-betrayal. I don't expect somebody to come in and all of a sudden they see the whole thing and be like, oh my God, they link their childhood to it, and they see where the patterns where they started to betray themselves, and all of a sudden they're not going to wake up tomorrow and do everything the opposite. So it's basically helping them take those small steps to be able to reconnect with themselves and be in a much deeper relationship with themselves. And that takes time.
Mhm.
Just like having an intimate relationship with another person, you don't just meet someone and have an intimate relationship. A healthy intimate relationship takes time and trust. So it's learning to trust yourself. And if you spent your whole life not trusting yourself, you can't expect that just because you understand something that you're going to change that quickly.
Yeah, and I think that when you're in a relationship, like you just mentioned, with someone else, whenever you change those relationship dynamics, even if you're the only one changing, it changes the whole thing. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember reading the book The Scream Free Marriage, and they used this example of like a campfire, where if you stop putting wood on it, you stop giving it air, or you stop providing a spark, it changes the entire campfire. So if you add wood to it, or if you add air to it, that's going to change it too. The one element, you don't have to have the wood agree to be lit on more fire if you're just adding more air to it, or like one element can change the entire kind of dynamic. And so I'm
100%.
I'm interested to know, how do couples manage what you're talking about when, they've been going along a certain way, and maybe one person, maybe both of them feel like, okay, we're doing okay. Like, it's, we have ups and downs, nothing crazy. And then, one person says to themselves, oh my gosh, I've been self-betraying. I haven't been speaking up, or whatever their thing is. Like, how do couples successfully manage that?
I think it depends on the couple, right? So if both people want to heal, then, there's support, right? If one person whose needs are being met the way they are, um, all of a sudden, let's just say the rules of the game change, then it can really disrupt the ecosystem. And, you know, it doesn't mean that it won't work out, but it requires both people wanting to get healthy. And as that's going to take two people in a relationship being able to attend to one another's needs.
Yeah, and so I think understanding that disruption too, I was just, talking to my therapist, and, he was talking about different phases of relationships. There's the initial kind of infatuation, we're all into each other phase, new relationship energy. Then usually couples have to kind of differentiate from each other, like, who am I within this relationship? And then, after that, kind of find that reintegration. And even for myself, when I look at, I was in a 17-year marriage, and, many people on the show know that, my ex chose to live in California, and I have near full custody of my kids now, and a major disruption. But over the last 3 years, post divorce, like, to look at my role in that 17-year marriage, like, I really unfortunately see that I did, kind of quiet myself more in that area than I do almost anywhere else in my life, where, I had some self-betrayal, where I was so scared being raised, Catholic, and in my, Polish Catholic family, the only people that got divorced were the ones that were married to people that it was like just such a, disruptive relationship. It's like, of course you're allowed to get divorced if it's that bonkers, but the people that didn't were those people that were just like quietly unhappy. And so that idea that I just kept my mouth shut on things that I now see as, like, I betrayed myself. Like, I muted what was appropriate and normal in a relationship. And I don't know that there's necessarily like regret around there, like where I've landed on the other side, like that taught me a lot of things. But it's like, to heal from that, it's like I had to swing into the other direction, where in my new relationship, sometimes I'm so dang rigid and speak up so much. It's like, and that's, I am a person just in life that I usually know what I want. I usually advocate for it. I tend to be pretty decisive, but I'm not always as soft as maybe I was in this previous relationship. And that's just like such a swing that I'm working on my therapist with, to just figure out like, okay, I did betray myself. I didn't do these things that, you know, I knew and I believed, but for some reason, like my past, history made me not want to speak up over these things. Like, what does that bring up for you hearing me, you know, vomit up a bunch of my life history?
No, no, no. Well, but it's a great example, and that's what I was saying earlier. How once you start setting boundaries and speaking up, like there's often a swing the other way, and there will be a swing back and where you find a soft way to be able to share. Because really what happens is, I like to think of it as, if you look at the physiology of it, your body's coming out of a freeze, right? The not speaking up is your body really shutting down.
Hmm.
And when you start finding your voice and you start, you know, tapping into your needs and being able to express them, you're often, what happens is you come out of the freeze and you're unthawing. So if the freeze response is unthawing, you're going to have a little bit of a fight or flight response until you find complete regulation in the system. So I would say it's a good thing right now, and that your system will go back to some balance with it when it's ready. But
Yeah.
it's got to find the equilibrium.
Well, I'm really glad you said it, because I think that, like, one thing I've been studying is the Taoist principle of non-action. In the world today, we can make a great case for why people need to stand up for it in action for the things they care about, and whatever that looks like in regards to the world they live in. And the Taoist approach is that a lot of the things that we take action on, we feel like we have to have conversations on, we, dig in with our friends or partners, or we're pissed off about. Many of them find that equilibrium on their own. They often point to nature as being something that just, you know, tends to find its equilibrium. And so that idea of not pushing, as someone that tends to be, pretty type A, pretty like, decisive, is actually refreshing to say, yeah, like, let me just let this unfold and see where I land. And like that release of the outcome is actually probably healthier for me than just about anything else.
Yeah, no, it's listen, it's like everything else, it's a process.
Mm. Now, Eileen, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I think that self-betrayal is a really important part of any human being's process. And if you're not working through this lens and considering it as an element of healing, that it might be something really powerful to explore. And, I invite every therapist to explore it for themselves, because, we can only take our clients as far as we're willing to go ourselves.
Mm, so true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, I know you have some new trainings that are coming out, some retreats and mastermind groups and things like that. Tell us a little bit about how people can follow your work.
So the best place to follow me is on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is the Ilene Smith, and Ilene is Ilene Smith, or go to my website, which is ilenesmith.com.
So awesome. Thank you for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is the Even Better Mental Wellness series. We are just moving in a direction of just helping ourselves as therapists, helping our clients, just working on all these different areas. So if you missed any of this series, that kicked off on March 4th, episode 1174. We're doing this all month long, and we're really enjoying doing these series. If you missed the beginning of the year, back in January, we had the Even Better Year series. So we talked about a bunch of things that can just move you and your practice towards a little bit better direction. And it kicked off, Brian Solis kicked it off with us with Mind Shift, how to transform leadership, drive innovation, and reshape the future. Episode 1148. Just so awesome. But we covered so many different things that month. In February, we had our marketing month. So all sorts of interviews there, just all about marketing. So you're going to want to make sure you check that out. And then we've got this one that you're participating in today. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We could not do this without our sponsors. Gusto is the best payroll solution out there. I'm working with a consulting client right now who has their accountant doing all of their payroll. It's a couple $100 a month. And I'm just like, the quality of the data that he's getting from his accountant is so much worse than what you can just pull up with Gusto for like a quarter of the price. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your business. It's super easy to get started. It's who we use here at Practice the Practice. It's totally worth the price. As a listener, you actually get 3 months totally for free over at gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe to get started today. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.